Sean Ingle from The Guardian wrote quite a timely piece on this during the week. It wasn't about the Munster situation, it was about Maria Sharapova's return at the Australian Open, and we spoke to Sean during the week about it, and he had quite a lot of academic research that suggested probably what we all knew, that if it's one of your own, you're less likely to be overly bothered, and that the more into something you are, the more into a team or the more into a sport, the more likely you are to ignore it. And is that just what we've seen this week, Alan, that actually we have proven once and for all that when it is one of our own, we are capable of turning a blind eye?
Yeah, actually, I think it's been a very interesting debate to watch from. I suppose I'd be kind of an outsider into it. I suppose you realise that a lot of different parties have different perspectives and are coming at it from different angles, but I think within a kind of crisis like this, or a huge talking point, people suggested maybe that just needs to blow away and go away. Then I would argue, well, what was the point of having the conversation in the first place? Because just bang the drum for a while, make a bit of noise, and then as you are, we all go back to doing what we were doing. And I suppose, like, on that note, I think there's opportunity there for, if it's the individual player, to step up and be a leader in this space and say exactly as Rory said, be honest and open about it, give a bit of insight, help create awareness and understanding of it for the Munster brand to do the exact same, to take leadership on it. And the IRFU also have questions to answer, and it goes up higher up the chain than that as well. And it's funny, I suppose if this was a player that the Crusaders had signed, we wouldn't even be talking here today.
Well, we weren't talking last year when he started harassing. So
it is an interesting thing that kind of when something is presented in front of you, and I think kind of human nature is that we don't really care about something unless it kind of directly affects us a lot of the time. But I think it's a conversation we are duty bound to have, but also someone's got to be responsible for trying to get leadership and action on that.
It is difficult when you hear about the focusing on the player and maybe what he's been going through over the last couple of weeks. It's almost impossible for anybody to relate to that because we know nothing about Gerbrandt Grobler. We don't know what type of personality he is, and until we do hear from him and we hear his story and he gets it out there, listen, people can then choose to believe it or not believe it and can take their own opinion. That until we actually hear from him, we get to know a little bit more about him. It's hard to really empathise with him.
But you're getting, it was very interesting listening to Carlo Del Fava during the week, listening to his story and where he came from. You're getting a very clear picture of the culture and the environment that these players have come from, that it is normalised. It is, whether some people like to say it's individuals, nobody I think at this stage would believe that there isn't a widespread issue in South Africa, and it's not credible to think that it's limited to one jurisdiction. So the story is the same. They're coming up through a culture that there's the demands made in terms of performance, and if you don't meet these criteria, you don't have a career in rugby. It's very black and white, and Carlos was very clear about that. They're coming, South Africa have a problem, they can't cater for all these players, so where do they go? They're coming into Europe where the money is. They're going to France, and now they're spilling out into Ireland. That's and it's becoming normalised, and I think that's the reality of what this conversation has exposed now. For too long in Irish rugby, and Alan Quinlan, for a long time Alan Quinlan was sort of dismissive of the notion of drugs in rugby. I think he was quoted saying he hasn't seen enough evidence to be believed, but yet he's quoted here to saying that today that he always knew that it was an issue in South Africa. So I think the reality is that it's becoming normalised, as it is in other sports, American sports, cycling, athletics, and that the supporters and the fans, as we now see with Munster, it's not that big an issue because they know it's there. And they're willing to accept that at a certain level and still support their team. And that's a sad reality of professional sport, I think, across the board.
It has to have been a very tough couple of weeks for Grobler, and some of the message you would hear is, well, what about his mental health? And I know you're very involved in this with the GPA. Like, is that something we just have to accept almost? Like, that's part of the punishment for doping, that this is never going to leave you. Okay, you serve a 2-year ban away from the game, but the other side of that, the other punishment is, actually, this is something that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life, and you're just going to have to put up with it. There's nothing you can do about it.
Like, from the player's perspective, I would have felt a certain amount of sympathy for him during the week as well, because it was very focused on the individual, say. But because technically he broke a rule, he got caught. He served the punishment from the governing body. It's not his fault that he wasn't given a lifetime ban. If he was given a lifetime ban, well then, he has to accept that. But he was given a ban, and he accepted it and had served it. So I struggled with the kind of frustration and the the thing towards him about going back and signing. Of course he's going to go back and sign because the rules are letting him, and he's allowed, and he's a player and he wants to do it. But from the other perspective, of course he's going to be feeling a huge amount of scrutiny, a huge amount of pressure, and I would have a significant sympathy for him in that regard. But at the same time, it's like with a crime like that, you do have to accept that scrutiny does come with that, and you are going to be tagged, and it's going to be a question asked of you.
Yeah,
he's been slightly unlucky as well, Nathan. He was signed by a guy who's not here anymore, and it was signed off by a person David Nisfor has had a very very tragic moment in his life just very recently. So I think the focus has probably come down on Grobler a bit more circumstantially, which has been a bit unfortunate for him. And obviously when a newspaper is writing an article about this, they need a picture, and the one picture they're always going to go for is of Gerbrandt Grobler, because he is the guy at the heart of the storm. But really the story is not about him. It's not at all. It's about Irish rugby, it's about Munster and the standards that they're setting.
Yeah, and there is a quote, and I think it was with the interview with Ger, with Philip Brown during the week, where when he's been asked how this came about, there was a crying need, which actually it felt like was one of those comments you're like, whoa, wait a second, that we're saying this is never going to happen again. What happens when we're in a crying need, that one of the provinces is in a crying need for a player, once again, that we just overlook these things?
And what is a crying need? What if Munster, Munster could have got a slightly less good second row, for want of better English. Is that really a crisis? They were obviously down numbers, but there's players on the market. They might not be as good as Grobler. They might be more expensive. There's obviously things that take into account, but they're obviously
there's players in the academy, and almost on that sort of mental health side of it, and looking towards the treatment of the player. Like, what about the guy from the Munster academy whose dream it has been all the way through and has done everything right from 13 years of age, played for the club teams, come through the academy, come through the province, and is waiting for his break at the big time, and then he doesn't get that because they've brought a player in from South Africa?
Well, the message is clear: do whatever it takes.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that the message? Is that, do you think, has that actually been broken within the Munster camp, that if you're 16, 17, 18 making your way through, that you are now actually, your entire attitude towards rugby has changed by this one incident?
Well, if the mixed messages from the rugby world continue, and on one hand you have some people saying that no, he shouldn't be played, he should be let go, his contract paid off, and that in some ways goes to rectify the issue. And then you have other players like Alan Quillan today, he should play.
Well, Alan also says that having a player of Grobler's obvious talent around the squad will help rather than hinder the likes of Finney and Wycherley. While it might help him technically, surely in terms of the ethos of what Munster's about, it can't be any help to anybody.
But that goes back to what Carlo Del Fava said during the week when he was asked about, because this, you're right in one hand that Gerbrandt has been victimised slightly because he hasn't been the first, he certainly won't be the last. But when he was asked, was it a discussion when you were being brought to Ulster, your past and the issue that you had served a ban? He says no, he says it wasn't relevant, it was all about performance. And that's, well,
he might as well have said they were in a crying need at that time.
It doesn't matter. As I say, it wasn't relevant, it wasn't an issue. We know what you've done, you've served your ban, we don't care, we need your quality and your performance. And in fairness, Alan Quinlan is effectively saying the same thing. We understand all that baggage, but from Munster's point of view, from a performance on the playing field, we're willing to take that on board for the betterment of the team, and that is a problem, in fairness, for Munster rugby.
Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray were put out in front of the media this week, Munster's two most senior players, and they said all the right things, and we have to take them at their word, that is what they believe, that he's come into the Munster setup, he's bought into it, he is now one of the squad, and the Munster thing you do is you stick by the players within that squad. You've been in that situation, I'm sure, where not to this extent, but where things happen within squads and maybe you're not personally happy about it. Do you always just have to, when you're part of a group, when you sign up for something like this, do you just have to take it on the chin that alright, you can't always speak out?
I think normally a dialogue will take place within a group, and there'll be kind of a collective decision of what the way to go with it is. We've all would have been in various types of those conversations, maybe nothing to this severity, but I think it is unfair a little bit how it's fallen at the players' feet as well, because they didn't sanction the transfer, they didn't sanction the move, and they're kind of being pushed out in front to take the slack and take the heat there, and so certain other people are maybe conveniently taking a back step. I just think, as a player, you're being put in the impossible position, because I don't think you really can tell the truth, because you've got a full organisation that you're a part of, you've got a dressing room that you've got to go back into, you probably have a game coming at the weekend, so I understand that perspective, and I think you're going to just toe the party line there, but I would suggest that players will feel differently privately and maybe amongst if it's family and friends or even among smaller groups of the dressing room.
Again, I'm just amazed, and one thing that always impressed me from Irish rugby was how good they were from a PR point of view, from the top down, how open they were with the media, how slick they were, how articulate they are about dealing with any issue that comes up, and how good they are at promoting their brand. And I'm so surprised how poor they have been in that regard this week. The lack of consensus, for Conor Murray to be put out in front, they're getting no leadership, they're getting no sense of this is the clarity, because they're getting mixed messages all over the place. Nobody knows what the right thing is to say, and that is probably stemming because they have kept the player in question behind a firewall. If he had come out and sort of said, listen, this is not for the players to speak, this is my issue, I understand, but they haven't. He's been kept behind, and players shouldn't be put
or
out,
the CEO
or somebody, and so for players to be put out ahead of all those stakeholders was very wrong and naive. But again, for an organisation that is generally so slick, they've been just very poor this week in that regard.
So much has gone on as well at Munster over the last 2.5-3 years off the pitch that it seems as though they've been in a permanent state of transition, and again they were looking to come out of that over the next few weeks and heading towards a place in the Champions Cup quarter-finals. Like an incident like this, you say, like, players are going to talk. Whatever they're saying to the media inside the dressing room can be a very different atmosphere. Can that become toxic very quickly? Is like that culture, that ethos, can that be lost very quickly?
From a playing point of view, I can see this galvanising the team, because in the same way as Rory was saying, Gerhardt was clapped off the field, this will, because it'll be a case of them against us mentality, and it could bond them. And because what else is there? The reality is the quickest way for this to be forgotten, to be accepted, is if Munster go out and win, and the fans are behind them, the Munster brand. If they get to a European final, this story will be forgotten about. This won't take the column inches up. It'll all be a brand Munster, and that's the reality. So I don't think it'll impact the panel an awful lot from a playing point of view, sadly.
I can't wait till maybe 5-6 years down the track and we get to talk to Conor Murray, who, in fairness to him, is generally very honest in interviews, but he's 8 years with the first team at Munster now. He has one Pro 12 title to his name. He's probably the best scrum half in the world. Those players that were there when he came into the squad all have a couple of European Cup medals in their back pocket. He doesn't have that. He hasn't contended in too many occasions, and he must be looking at what's happened off the pitch over the last couple of years and just wondering what the hell is going on, that Donnacha Ryan, Simon Zebo are being allowed to leave the province, and that there just seems to be one issue after another, that again, for the values, the ethos of being a world leading brand, that they've actually fallen down quite a bit in many ways over the last couple of years.
I would say one thing for the Munster squad is they're quite resilient. I mean, they've been through quite a lot of whatever the Anthony Foley tragedy, the change of coach this year. They obviously had a massive dip the 2 years before Ozzy Rasmus came in, and they've gotten back to a high level performance, and this season they are performing despite having an awful lot going on around them. So they've obviously learned how to deal with being in flux quite a lot. But I guess this is what the worry was last month, when the big story was the two players that they were trying to hang on to. If one of them left, would that damage Munster so much? But they seem to be able to ride through the storm, and I think Dick's right. I think they will use this to galvanise themselves. I think that they'll quite easily convince themselves that this was a double media witch hunt, and that it's us against the world all over again, and there's no better man than Munster to use that as a motivating factor and go far this season.
How does that manifest itself over the next few weeks then, when we're going to have probably daily press conferences surrounding the Six Nations? Is this going to come up with every single interview, with every player, with every backs coach, with Joe Schmidt?
I don't know. I'm not sure if Joe will be asked to address it next week when he meets the media for the first time. I don't.
He surely will.
It probably will, but I mean, I don't see this being an issue during the Six Nations. Like, Grobler's not involved. He'll probably make his debut during that time, so it may come up then. I just don't know what value there is to be gained from keeping asking players the same questions when you know what the answer is going to be. So it was asked at the Leinster press conference this week, it was asked at the Ulster press conference. I thought Chris Henry's comments were very impressive. as I said, I think that the only logical next step is either Grobler speaks or we get a defined policy from the IRFU written down in black and white, because that's what's been missing really. And obviously in time David Nucifora will eventually speak and we'll get his side of the story. But I don't see what's to be gained by dragging every player who's put up for media for the next 6 weeks.
I think a bit of honesty across the board on rugby's part is badly needed, and it's been exposed here for too long. Again, I said it earlier, we've been fed this that isn't a problem in rugby and players, but yet now it's all come to the surface. All it is, we knew in South Africa, France. So all these rumours and issues that have been circling for the last couple of years, they're all been validated. So it is a problem. It's a problem for every sport, across the board. Gaelic games, amateur sports, athletics. We all know about the problems in cycling, etc. It's a problem, and they're just going to have to contend with. So they need to face up as a problem. They're going to have to deal with it, but starting from the top, what is the policy? And don't be making a policy just on the back of this incident, because there's no point in thinking that this will be the last time a player will be found out. So is it a case of, we're going to say lifetime ban? So if one of your own players is found taking a breaching the guidelines, that's his career finished? I think we can overreact on these as well. Set clear guidelines and abide by them, but quit with this mixed messages that it isn't a problem and it's somewhere else's problem. It's a problem for everybody, and we just have to deal with it.
It sort of feels, particularly with the Maria Sharapova case, that in some ways the battle against dopers is being lost. That no longer is it a case that you get a ban for doping and you can come back to your sport after 2 years, and maybe it's been increased in some sports to 4 years, but you can come back after 2 years, but you sort of come back under the radar. There's certainly no love from the public there for you. We see with Justin Gatlin that maybe again it suited the IAAF that they had the hero in Usain Bolt, and it was easy to put Justin Gatlin up as the villain. He certainly wasn't being cheered in many of the stadiums where he was back racing. But with Maria Sharapova, she returns at the Australian Open essentially as a heroine, that she is the poster girl. She is there front and centre of women's tennis once again, and it doesn't seem as though certainly the public who are attending the Australian Open seem to care less what she did in the past.
No, part of me thinks just the more this is talked about, the more weary everyone is getting with it, and because no one's providing either a practical solution or a clear direction or leadership on it, it's kind of the easy option is just to shrug the shoulders and move on. It's kind of Dick alluded to there, this requires really strong leadership, and I suppose we're in a sport has become very business orientated. There's huge PR spin masters floating around, and someone's managed Maria's return very cleverly, and we're eased back in here, we'll do this, we'll do that, here's a nice fluffy little interview, here's a nice fluffy little video, but lots of us are just letting that happen and accepting that, and I said I don't know where the leadership comes from in this, because it's a cross-sport issue. It's not a particular sport, it's not a particular code, it's not a particular age group, and it might be time for sport organisations to come together and actually just chalk it all down, have a very serious conversation and decide where we're going with all this, because if it's left as is, it's just going to keep slowly going and we're going to end up at a stage where we go, how did we end up here?
The problem with that, Alan, is now in professional sport, a high level professional sport, I'm talking the NFL, NBA, world tennis, athletes are a commodity. It's a business, it's about money. Athletes are expendable, they're marketable or they're not. Maria Sharapova, someone else will take her place. Hugh McKenna wrote a very good piece during the week, putting the onus back on the fans, the supporters, because we ultimately will dictate that business. If we all decided not to tune into Maria Sharapova and nobody was watching her on Sky, well then you'd find that situation would change. But the reality is, if she gets to an Australian Open final in a couple of weeks' time, we'd all probably tune in. Oh God, this will be interesting. What's the reaction? The same way as we're all tuning into the NBA, or not the NBA, the NFL playoffs now. We all know what we're looking at. We all know what, and as do the packed stadiums in Pittsburgh, in Boston, in New York. They all know what they're looking at, but they've accepted it.
Do people actually care anymore?
They don't. And the reality is they're willing to accept that reality for the entertainment value, for the business of sport, and that's where rugby is now approaching. It's going to approach a normalised level that we accept that. Because that's professional sport across the board, and it's creeping into amateur sports as well, and the GAA can't be naive, and I would have been naive for a while to think we're exempt, but it'll not be to this same extent.
We're living in a very strange time, an interesting time in a kind of a media world where people are starting to get their information directly from source. So, we see Twitter, Marie Sharapova will manage her own message on Twitter. The RFU are increasingly trying to reach fans through their own Facebook page, through their own Twitter handle, through through their own website. If you only follow the RFU in Munster and you get all your Munster and RFU news, you wouldn't know Gerbrandt Grobler had ever done it 2 years for doping. The FAI this week, I think, used their own channel to give a soft stop to Martin O'Neill. So there are a lot of fans who, if they want to, can just go stay within the sport, and they never have to listen to the four of us, with our issues. Well, and that's their own choice. But the choice that they make is then they lose any objectivity around their sport. And you see it with. There was another piece this week written. I can't remember who wrote it. It was about the increasing venom around the Premier League and the fact that the blogs and Arsenal Fan TV, all this stuff. It's all channeled around your own club. You're increasingly streamlined, and you lose any objectivity you have. And I think there's a worrying development there that if people are getting their information from official channels all the time, if officialdom doesn't want you to know the truth, then how are you ever going to know it?
Getting a lot of texts in on this. What you should be talking about is 16-year-old schools players been asked to put on £10 over the summer. They're not doing it on Skinless Chicken. Will GAA players who test positive be banned for life? I don't think so, says Paul in Waterford. Well, you can't ban people for life right now. And also,
you can choose not to pick them.
You can choose not to pick them. Lads, it's a lifetime ban. No place for you if you dope. End of story. Stripped of everything in the past too. All medal and accolades and monies won to be paid back, says Chris in Dublin. Again, like Cliona Foley spoke very well on this during the week, that she has come around to the way of thinking of we need to find a way of getting life bans in place because of the damage that you're doing to other competitors by doping, that ultimately second chances, yeah, you can have a second chance in another part of your life, but with this, if you dope, that is the end.
And this is where when you get into the technical side of it, and this is where you could get totally lost and people start to tune out. Okay, so is it a case of you're either a doper or you're not? Like from playing, and Alan, you'd have seen this when it came in, the doping guidelines, what you can and can't take, and what if you exceeded that you would fail. So therefore, are you a doper? If you took Lemsip Max along with Sudafed and you were tested an hour later, you could fail a test. So does that mean you should get a lifetime ban for that? For somebody that might just want to be healthy so we can go to do a day's work, is that the same as taking anabolic steroids to put on 10 kilos? This is where it gets clouded, and that's why people find it difficult to say it's a one hat fits all approach, because can you do that? And that's where it gets very difficult, and that's where there's absolutely no consensus on it, and understandably so.
Yeah, and again, you definitely feel you're going to get so parochial around that. You look at the cases within the GAA, you look at the Brendan O'Sullivan case, and you think, alright, maybe he was just stupid, maybe he was just incredibly stupid and taking advice from someone and taking the wrong thing. Like, if that was a Russian athlete going to the Olympics, you wouldn't think about it for a second. You think they should be banned for life.
Yeah.
Cheaters. So again, you do go back to that, when it is one of your own, you do just look at it slightly differently. You have a more human, nice side to it that's not there when it is a Russian athlete or when it's a Kenyan athlete. Yeah, there probably is no real answer, and it doesn't look as though right now there's any, certainly again we come back to the governing bodies and leadership, that they're pushing for life bans. We haven't even
got into the legalised doping with therapeutic use exemptions, pain management, all these other grey areas, and like that's your own, it's an absolute minefield when you get into it. But there is big an issue, probably more so, that's not been talked about. The use of anti-inflammatory injections to keep playing in the game, and all of that, and that's a very, very grey area, which I have a bit of experience in as well.
Yeah, Liam Toland I think wrote a very good article yesterday on this as well, about how the copycat culture that is there for young players, and that if Kristen Ashton does a swan dive on Saturday, well, all of his under 14s or under 16s are going to be doing the swan dive on Sunday, and if they're looking at players built like tanks, the under 14s, under 16s, and I think putting it in the context of they probably starting to know at that stage they mightn't play professional rugby, but they know that they can look like that if they take the right thing.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond sports, and there's people I think we're all around the same age, and we've all seen the lads 10 years younger than us look a bit different to the way we did when we were 18 and 19, or they've there's a societal, there's kind of an aesthetic to it that is coming through, a kind of that you see the Garda seizures all the time of different steroids. There's a whole, and if people are taking them for cosmetic purposes, then why would they feel that rugby players shouldn't be doing it? If there's a sea change in the way people are looking at this thing in society, then it's going to be harder and harder to stop in sport because it's just normalised.
The danger is that we develop a weary acceptance of doping, similar to what you see in American sport. People are no longer outraged by individual cases because they think everyone is at it. With rugby, the standard view is, sure, look at the size of them. Dave, in Meath, I think, probably going back to what you were saying there, Dick, we'll probably leave the rugby chat at that for now.